Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
GSMC Basketball Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah. In today's podcast, we'll look back at some of the biggest games that happened over the weekend. We'll talk about a dominant few games for the Los Angeles Lakers before looking at a few big teams that have stumbled a bit in recent games. We'll talk about some news coming out of Brooklyn before ending the show on who's hot and who's not. Now, last podcast, I made some predictions on some of the bigger games happening over the weekend. The first one we talked about was the Warriors versus the Raptors. Now, in hindsight, this isn't necessarily a big game just because, you know, as most people would know, the Golden State Warriors are the worst team in the league in the Western Conference right now. And the Toronto Raptors are second place in the Eastern Conference. So this, to most people, wouldn't seem as a big matchup. But the reason why I added it and the reason why I thought it was going to be a really good matchup is because Stephen Curry finally would make his return after missing 4 months and most of the season, only playing 4 games to this point, and he would return after breaking his hand. So it was a big deal. It was also a finals rematch with a little bit more star power added to it, although the Warriors would be without Kevon Looney, would be without Draymond Green, so a little bit hindered there, but having Steph back just brought new life to this game. The Raptors did just beat the Suns coming into this game to end a 3-game losing streak. And so for them, this was a big stepping stone for them to continue on adding on to their confidence, having Golden State Warriors up, thinking that this would probably be an easy game. They did have a few players questionable that did end up playing in this game. I ended up going with the Raptors just because it makes more sense. I mean, I have to be a realist, have to be realistic about the fact that Golden State Warriors are nowhere near as good as they were when these two met in the finals last year. And some could argue that the Raptors are still just as good even without Kawhi Leonard. So the odds were very much in the Raptors' favor, and I ended up being correct. It was a very close game, though. Very fun to watch. The Warriors put up a very good fight in this one, kind of surprisingly, in fact, because it is Stephen Curry's first game back. And so you wouldn't necessarily expect him to be what he was, 4 months ago prior to injury, because you're out of rhythm. You haven't played to the speed of your opponents in a long time, haven't been in that competitive nature in a while. But in his return, he scored 23 points, had 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. So that's a pretty good outing for a guy that hasn't played in 4.5 months. He looked just like himself, and he never looked more like himself than when Pascal hit him out on the wing, and the ball was kind of falling backwards. He kind of did a fadeaway 3 to beat the shot clock buzzer, and he got it to go nothing but net. So when he hit that, I kind of figured that Stephen Curry was going to be just fine. He also had an amazing behind-the-back pass to Andrew Wiggins, kind of like a no-look pass as well for 2 points. And so there's obviously no rest for Stephen Curry. The only issue was that he was on a minutes restriction, which clearly annoyed him. You could tell he hit a big 3, his first 3 since returning, and then immediately got subbed out the next possession, unfortunately for him. Damian Lee for the Golden State Warriors had a rough few final minutes that were costly, but he played really well, ended up bouncing back as well, helping his team win against the 76ers later on in the week. The Warriors were down with a minute to go, and then Siakam scored twice, quick baskets, and put the game out of reach again. Raptors would win this one 121-113. So a tough test pass for the Raptors, who clinched a playoff spot with this win. And so it was a good stepping stone for them to get into the playoffs this early on. And I think it was really good for the Warriors, too. They looked good. Curry was much better than most people would have expected. But unfortunately for the Warriors, he would end up getting the flu. But fortunately for the Warriors, they didn't need him to beat the Sixers a few days later. But it is unknown what Curry's status is as of right now. They're hoping he'll come back for their next game on Tuesday. The next game I talked about was Thursday, the Clippers versus Rockets. I went with the Clippers right off the bat, just was saying it. They were on a 5-game win streak at this point. The Rockets had just lost to the Knicks, so I had a little bit of concerns about how the Rockets were doing thus far this season. The Rockets' small ball has typically been their strong suit in their last few games leading up to this, but I felt like it wouldn't be an issue for the Clippers just because I felt like they matched up really well. The Rockets did own the series lead up to this point, leading 2-1, but the Clippers being fully healthy and having a deeper squad, even though the Rockets have more firepower in James Harden and Russell Westbrook, I just felt like the quantity over quality would end up winning in this game, and the Clippers did, in fact, win this game. I had the over-under at 5, but should have multiplied it by 3 because the Clippers won this one 120-105, a very big victory for the Clippers. Houston had a big fourth quarter scoring 40 points, but it was too little too late, and so the season series is now tied at 2-2. The Clippers at this point now are at a 6-game win streak. And I'm going to be breaking down this game just a little bit more later in the podcast. But Houston ended their streak of hitting at least 10 threes for 18 straight games. So just kind of a little tease for later. The next game I looked at was Friday when it was the Bucks versus Los Angeles Lakers. This was the big one, the big blockbuster game. The Bucks won game 1 of this matchup 111-104. This game happened to be at Staples Center, so a little bit of, home advantage for the Los Angeles Lakers. And I went with the Milwaukee Bucks just because I felt like, they had just beaten the Pacers, a great team in the East. Before that, they had lost the game, and Giannis had only scored 13 points, so I figured there's no way that's going to happen again. Plus, it's the Bucks. They've only lost, 9 games up to this point, so it was tough for me to think that they could lose this game, but then again, I didn't give enough credit to how great Los Angeles Lakers are. I also did throw out the fact that maybe Chris Middleton might shy away from this game because he does have a tendency to disappear in high volume games and high stakes games, and I was actually right about that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. If the Lakers won this game, it would leave a lot of questions about how this would go if this was the actual finals matchup, having both teams, win a game at home if they win. And the Lakers did end up winning this game. They won 113-103 to even up the season series. With that win, they clinched a playoff spot for the first time since 2013. That's the longest drought in franchise history for the Los Angeles Lakers, which isn't that long, so really they're pretty lucky about that. LeBron said, quote, "I came here to put this franchise back where it needed to be. The league is not what it is if the Lakers are not winning," end quote. Which is fair because they're one of the most decorated franchises in the league. The Bucks, on the other hand, have lost 2 of their last 3 by losing this game. That's the first time that's happened since October. Giannis said they just didn't play smart. They sent them to the line too much. And the Lakers had a big third quarter that carried them over when they outscored the Bucks 39-28. The biggest moment in this game, though, was when Giannis had a very scary fall late in the game, hurting his knee. He stayed in and consistently was saying that his knee was good, but later we found out he'll be sitting out 2 games. More on that later. LeBron in this game hit 34,000 points, and the only others to reach that feat are Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Karl Malone. So he's in very, very good company. And it's just another milestone LeBron hits on his quest to become the greatest of all time. Like I said, though, I was right about Chris Middleton. He disappeared in this game just a little bit. Was 5 for 19 from the field, 2 of 10 on threes, and he had 3 turnovers as well. In my opinion, I think Giannis Antetokounmpo needs a better second if they are going to win this NBA Finals, because even though they have been very consistent, have beaten teams very convincingly for most of the season, once you get into the playoffs, it's a different animal. It's a different beast. And he's going to need someone else to rely on, and I don't know if that's going to be Chris Middleton or not. Then lastly, we talked about another huge matchup between the Los Angeles Lakers and the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers have dominated this matchup so far. They've won both previous matchups, with the first one being 112-102, and the second being 111-106. They were coming off a win against Houston, like I talked about earlier, so I figured they'd be riding high. The Lakers, not as deep as the Clippers are, in my opinion, and it would be the first battle between the Morris brothers, Markieff and Marcus, who are on the respective teams. And I went with the Clippers. I think they were going to be making more headway in the standings and putting some pressure on the Lakers, and being on a 6-game win streak and having their fully healthy squad, I thought there was no way they would lose this game. I was right about them beating the Rockets, so they would get on that 6-game win streak, but I was wrong about this game. The Lakers would win 112-103. The Clippers had more turnovers than assists this time around, turning over the ball 15 times and only getting 12 assists, so not a good look for them. Clippers before this were 10-0 when all starters were healthy. This is the first loss when they had a full healthy squad, so still some good signs for things to come, I think, in my opinion. Of course, the big stars performed in terms of LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George. It was the supporting cast for the Lakers that happened to be a little bit better, though, which was surprising to me. Avery Bradley played really well for Lakers. More on that later. And Marcus Morris and Lou Williams were honestly very disappointing for me. Marcus Morris had 1 point in 29 minutes. He was 0 for 9, had 6 rebounds, and 5 fouls. So really, I don't know what he was doing out on the court. I don't know what's happened from his time from the New York Knicks till now. But he has not fit into this Clippers team the way that a lot of people thought he would. He was a player that, the Los Angeles Lakers were looking to get after too, but the Clippers beat him to it. And they saw that as a huge win. And so far, it hasn't really benefited them that much. I think he probably still needs some time, but he needs to start getting into that rhythm now, heading into playoffs, especially in these big games against the Los Angeles Lakers. Also, Lou Williams only had 7 points in this one. He was 3 for 11 from the field, which is not something you see from Lou Williams. It's just not. He's usually their third best scorer coming off the bench. Also, Patrick Beverley, he's hilarious to me. He tries to body LeBron at one point. LeBron just kind of shoved him away, swatted him away like a fly, basically. And then Patrick Beverley, after the game, he said, he gave credit to the Lakers. It was a great win for them. And then he was asked, is it a challenge to guard LeBron? And he said, no, it's not a challenge. What? I don't get how Patrick Beverley can talk so much trash, but he had 2 points, had 1 assist, and was negative 16 in his plus minus. Honestly, he's insane. He's such a clown sometimes. But either way, those were the big games happening over the last couple of days. The Lakers end up getting the win, still losing the series right now 2-1. The Clippers are still leading that. But the Lakers have been an impressive team over the last week, so we're going to dive deeper into these games and speculate what it all means. Stay with us.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about some of the biggest games that happened over the last few days that I had predictions on from last podcast. The Warriors versus the Raptors being a little bit closer than most people would have thought because Stephen Curry made his return. Was really impressive at 23 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. Clippers end up beating the Rockets, going on a 6-game win streak after that. And the Rockets are looking a little rough right now, but we'll get more on that later. The Bucks fall to the Lakers for the first time this season. And a great finals preview matchup potentially. Middleton kind of shied away from the pressure, and Los Angeles Lakers stars just outshone Giannis in this one. And then Lakers versus Clippers as well. Lakers finally get a win in that matchup, so it's a good segue into our next segment. The Lakers have not had an easy week by any means. They've won 11 of their last 12 games, so they've been dominant. They've been extremely consistent. They're on a 4-game win streak as of right now with some big names that they've played against during that time. First off, they played the Pelicans to beat them. The Pelicans are playing a lot better right now. They're in a great position to try and overtake the Memphis Grizzlies. They're the team right below them now in 9th place. They're only 4 games back, and they can potentially beat them and leapfrog them. And LeBron just got up for the matchup. I think he just loves the fact that he's playing against Zion Williamson, a kid that's looking to take the throne, the attention from the league once LeBron's days are over, because he's just playing really well in his rookie campaign. And he's been a very dominant force thus far. Then they went on and beat the Sixers. They don't have their stars in Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, so it's not as impressive, but either way, you still have to win your games, still have to go out and compete, so credit for them to doing that. Then they beat the Milwaukee Bucks, so let's dive into this one just a little more. He's up against the reigning MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo. This is a marquee matchup between two of the biggest stars in the NBA. The first quarter started out pretty slow with the Bucks up 22-19 at the end of it. Giannis had already had 10 points so far in this game, so it was looking like he was going to have a really big game. Second quarter ensued, and both offenses started to wake up a bit more, and LeBron James especially started asserting his dominance. He responded in the second with a 10-point quarter of his own to match Giannis' first quarter, and this was highlighted by a drive and slam over Brook Lopez. So he's just showing his strength, going over a 7-foot-tall Brook Lopez and showing his athleticism in doing so. The game would end up being tied at halftime. And if you remember from early on in the podcast, the third quarter was the big one for the Lakers. The first 2 quarters were both separated by 3 points at the end of it. But this third quarter, the Lakers outscored the Bucks 39-28. LeBron, of course, leading the way with 14 points in this one, and his running mate in Anthony Davis had 11 points. The Lakers' biggest lead would end up being 15 in this quarter. Going into the fourth, the Bucks still trailing by 11. Giannis would score another 12 points, with half of those coming from the line, but he would be outdone by LeBron and AD, who scored 11 points and 14 points respectively. The closest the Bucks would get would be 98-94. Middleton about to attempt a 3 to bring them within 1. And Anthony Davis sprints from behind him, basically from half court, and ends up getting a huge block. And from there, the Lakers extended out again. The Lakers win the game 113-103. The season series gets tied at 1 at this point. The Bucks have lost 2 of 3 for the first time since October. And the Lakers have now clinched a playoff spot. So a lot of good things going on for the Lakers, and very opposite run of fortune for the Milwaukee Bucks. I worried about Middleton shying away from a big game, and that's exactly what happened. Giannis, he had a great game. And, of course, he had a great game. He's Giannis. He had 32 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists with a steal. But up next, in terms of scoring, was DiVincenzo, who, like I said in the last podcast, is playing pretty well as of late. But that shouldn't be your second highest scorer, in my opinion. Maybe from night to night, maybe, but he won't be consistently your second best scorer. He had 17 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. Then it was Brook Lopez, who definitely isn't your third highest scorer. He had 13 points and 5 rebounds. But in my opinion, he did not shoot enough at all. I mean, he had 10 points at halftime. Started it out really well. So that means he only scored 3 points in the second half. Quick math. But that just shows that he doesn't shoot the ball enough. I feel like he's a pretty good stretch 5. He can definitely hit threes, especially from the corner. So he should probably impose himself a little bit more when players like Middleton are struggling. And Middleton did struggle. He had 12 points, had 5 rebounds and 4 assists with 3 turnovers. He shot the ball 5 for 19 from the field and 2 for 10 from three-point land. So not a good outing for him at all. Eric Bledsoe had 11 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists with 3 steals, but he had 5 turnovers, and he shot 5 of 13 and didn't hit a single three-pointer. So not a great game for the supporting cast for the Bucks, who typically perform because Giannis is just that good and puts them in good positions to be successful. But in a big game, he really just had no help. And Eric Bledsoe and Chris Middleton should be your 2 and 3 and should be the people that help Giannis move this team forward. But in this game, both of them combining for 23 points is just not going to do it, especially against a great team in Los Angeles. The two big stars in LA went off. LeBron had 37 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists with 3 steals. And then Anthony Davis had 30 points, 9 rebounds with 2 blocks. After that, Kyle Kuzma was the next biggest scorer with 11. He also had 8 boards, and then no more double-digit scoring after that. The biggest thing for me, though, was one matched up against LeBron. Giannis just wasn't as good. He had 7 points. He was 2 for 8 from the field, and he was 1 for 5 from downtown with a turnover. So LeBron really asserting himself, playing great defense, and trying to stop Giannis is nearly impossible, and he pretty much did that. 2 from 8 from the field. I would consider that a job well done for LeBron James. And it just shows that he loves getting up for these big games. I mean, I talked about it early on in the year that I feel like he doesn't assert himself enough and doesn't score as much. Like, yes, he's turned into a point forward and the person that gets the most amount of assists. He handles the ball, moves the ball around, runs the offense, what have you. But I never thought he scored enough. Now, in this game, he scored 37 points, and he also limited Giannis to only 7 points when matched up against him. So that's a great outing for LeBron James. Speaking of which, up next he had the Clippers, a team he hadn't beaten this year, and his numbers against the Clippers compared to his averages just haven't been good. So this was a big test for him. And then after facing the reigning MVP in Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's now facing the reigning Finals MVP in Kawhi Leonard. So back-to-back tough matchups for him. Both players, trying to take the crown in recent years because, Giannis has won MVP last season. Kawhi's been quietly just a beast in the NBA, one of the Finals MVP last year. So this is another big test for him. He would be catching the Clippers on a hot run where they're on a 6-game win streak and 5.5 back from the Lakers. And after a very close first quarter, saw them have a 2-point lead, the Clippers started showing signs of just a little more dominance in the second quarter. LeBron had to score half of the Lakers' points in the second quarter, getting outscored 28-22, with the Clippers taking a 53-49 halftime lead. Then the momentum went back to the Lakers and stayed with them for the rest of the game. Despite LeBron having 0 points in the third quarter, the Lakers posted their highest scoring quarter of this game. They had 36, led by none other than Avery Bradley. He was 4 for 6 from downtown for 12 points and a big momentum swing for the Lakers in this quarter. LeBron took over again in the fourth to put this game out of reach, seeing the Lakers win 112-103. The Lakers pull one back against a team they were 0-2 against, and I think it's a statement win in some ways, but for me, the Clippers are still better. I still stand by them being a deeper team. They just didn't compete hard enough to win, in my opinion. Paul George had 31 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, with 3 steals and a block to lead all scorers. Kawhi Leonard had 27 points and 2 rebounds, but that's it. A guy like Kawhi Leonard, I feel like he should be imposing himself a lot more, especially on the boards, and definitely could handle the ball a little more and get some more assists. But only 2 rebounds is just not enough for Kawhi Leonard. He needs to be doing more for his team. Montrezl Harrell had 20 points, 8 rebounds with 2 blocks. That's a good stat line for him. The next highest scorer, though, was Reggie Jackson with 8 points. Lou Williams had 7 points like we talked about before. He's usually a guy that gets you 20 plus. He's usually the highest scorer coming off the bench. Patrick Beverley, your starting point guard, had 2 points. Marcus Morris had 1 point. I mean, these are typically players you would expect at least double-digit scoring from. So for them just not to perform in this one was very disappointing to see. And it could have made for a lot better of a game if they had been more competitive. And for the Lakers, it was Anthony Davis who led all scorers for them. Had 30 points, 8 rebounds with 2 steals and a block. LeBron James had 28 points, 7 rebounds, 9 assists, almost another triple-double, with 2 blocks as well. And then Avery Bradley, 24 points with 2 steals. Great game for him, one of his best of the season so far. The Lakers didn't have another double-digit score after that. So you could argue that Kuzma should probably be in that double-digit scoring. Danny Green especially, because he had 0 points in this one. Dwight Howard had 0 points in this one. So there are some players on the bench that didn't perform for the Lakers as well. But in my opinion, I still think Clippers should expect more double-digit scoring from their players, especially from Lou Williams, and especially from Marcus Morris, a player that was just so dominant in the New York Knicks. So, nevertheless, it's a big weekend for the Lakers. Statement wins, assertion of dominance, beating the best team record-wise in the league and a team you hadn't beaten all year. That's a great, great outing for them in just a 2-game span. And it's really reawakened this conversation about whether or not LeBron James should be the MVP. I mean, beating the reigning MVP and beating the reigning finals MVP, 2 of the best teams in the league, you would think, because of just how well he played in both those games. But that's a topic for another time. It's been a great couple of games for the Lakers, but on the other side of fortune are the Houston Rockets, who are on a 4-game skid all of a sudden. We check in on them to see what's happening coming up next.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about how the Los Angeles Lakers have had a very successful few games. Most recently, their last 2 games, they beat the Milwaukee Bucks, the best team in the league, with the best player in the league, in Giannis Antetokounmpo. And then they followed that win up against a team that they hadn't beaten all year, the Los Angeles Clippers. They had previously lost the 2 matchups against them. And against the reigning finals MVP in Kawhi Leonard, it's a great matchup for LeBron James. And he took it with a full head of steam, won that game as well. And so now the Lakers, 2 big statement wins, really showing their dominance and really showing that they should not be trifled with. They could definitely win the whole thing this year, but it's yet to be seen, so we'll see. The Houston Rockets on the other side of fortune, after being on a crazy 6-game win streak in which they beat teams like the Celtics twice, the Grizzlies, and the Jazz, to see them go 4th in the standings. Now the Rockets have lost 4 straight and are in 6th place. They've fallen all the way down to 6th. The losing streak started with the New York Knicks, like we talked about in the last podcast. Not a great game for them by their standards at all. They just got completely bullied down low. And the Knicks made use of them playing small ball. The next game up was against the Clippers, where they lost by 15. We briefly discussed it earlier in the podcast. They just got outplayed in every quarter except for the 4th, where it was just too little too late. Westbrook had led all scorers with 29 points, 15 rebounds, 5 assists, but he's 11 for 27 from the field, so not as efficient as he's usually been since implementing this small ball lineup that they have. He's been consistently good in terms of his field goal percentage in these few games, but in this one, not as great. Too many field goal attempts, and I think probably that hindered his team's ability to score as well. And then what really hurt them was that James Harden struggled in this one, had 16 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and went 4 for 17 from the field and 0 for 8 from three-point land. He had 8 points at the line, so half of his points from the line. He scored 8 points from the field. That's not what you expect from James Harden at all. Just losing to the Knicks is scary enough. Losing to a better team than the Clippers isn't as bad. They're a tough team, so you can argue that, it's just a tough loss. But their next two losses came at the hands of the Charlotte Hornets and the Orlando Magic. What is going on with the Houston Rockets? Let's dive deeper into these ones. Against the Charlotte Hornets, they're playing without Russell Westbrook. The Charlotte Hornets at this time, though, were on a 3-game losing streak. So a good team to go up against and gain your confidence against, you would think. But no, from the start of the game, it was very telling in how this game would end up. The Hornets opened up the game on a 20-0 run. Yes, you heard that right. The Hornets scored the first 20 points of the game. The Rockets had no response for 20 first points that the Hornets had. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. I don't know if I've ever seen something like that. During that time, the Rockets had 8 turnovers, had missed 5 3-pointers, and on their first 12 possessions. It's just yikes. That's not a good start at all for any team. The Rockets would respond pretty well, chipping away at the lead little by little and getting within 3 just a few times. But the Hornets finished the second quarter really well to have a 57-43 lead at halftime. The third quarter would be Houston's best quarter, outscoring the Hornets 33-25, now down 82-76. So maybe they had another push in them to go into the fourth quarter and try and win this game. Unfortunately for them, they would not have another push in them. In fact, it took them almost 5 minutes to score in the fourth quarter, while the Hornets, in the meantime, ran up the score again. They lost this game 108-99 to the Charlotte Hornets, a team that is not very good this year at all. I mean, they're 22-41. They're in 10th in the Eastern Conference right now, and just really, who's better? I mean, the star power of Houston compared to the star power of Charlotte Hornets, it makes no sense. The narratives will have Harden getting his 46th career triple-double in a losing effort, but to me, this triple-double wasn't impressive. Yes, you have to assist your teammates, and you have to grab some boards. That part of it is impressive. But let me tell you why I was upset about this. James Harden, his stat line, 30 points, 10 rebounds, 14 assists. Sounds pretty good, right? 30 points, 30-point triple-double. It's impressive. But if you look about how he got his points, I'm not impressed. He shot 8 for 22 from the field. He shot 2 for 11 from three-point land. Not only that, he didn't just get a triple-double. He got a quadruple-double. He had 10 turnovers. That is ridiculous. I mean, I've gotten on James Harden on these podcasts before about turning the ball over, but to get a quadruple-double, to just put a blemish on the fact that you just lost to the Charlotte Hornets by getting a quadruple-double where turnovers are included, it's just not good for the Houston Rockets at all. On the bright side, though, Robert Covington had one of his best, if not the best game as a Rocket for himself. He had 25 points, 6 rebounds, with a steal and 2 blocks. And he was 7 for 13 from downtown, so he was your most consistent shooter in a night where you didn't have Russell Westbrook, and James Harden just couldn't find a bucket other than at the free throw line. Jeff Green added 20 points in this one. Now, the Houston Rockets are on a 3-game skid, going up against the Orlando Magic, another team that's not that great, and you should probably beat, but no. In fact, they trailed by 25 at the half. That's not even the worst part. They trailed by 32 at one point. They lost 126-106. Just, wow. Westbrook scored a team-high 24 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists in his return, but he also brought along 8 turnovers. So he's not the only one, or James Harden's not the only one, that just turns over the ball for fun. He's now scored 20 or more points in 33 straight games, though, so very impressive feat for Russell Westbrook. He's been extremely consistent, probably the Rockets' best player of the last couple weeks, maybe the last month. James Harden, this one, had 23 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists with 3 steals. But again, he shot 6 for 19 and was 3 for 10 from three-point land. So I don't know what James Harden needs to do about his shot selection, but he needs to become more efficient. And he needs to start knocking down shots again like he did early on in the season where he was averaging 38 points per game. And I'm not saying he has to go out and score 38 points per game, but at least be efficient with your shot selection. I feel like maybe sometimes he's just forcing it, and that's why the numbers don't do him justice. Jeff Green added 18 points. So Jeff Green, back-to-back good performances. That's a good sign for them when they get this thing turned around. But now, the Houston Rockets are on a 4-game losing streak. That ties their worst of the season thus far. The Rockets, they just look out of sorts. They've kind of lost their way a bit. Mike D'Antoni saying that you can just tell that his players are questioning everything that they're doing at this time. And then James Harden said that he thinks that they just got to fight through it and that the tides will change. And, he's probably right. I mean, this happens to teams. There's highs and lows of the season. But it's just weird to see in the manner that they're doing it. I mean, they lost to the Knicks, the Hornets, and the Magic within their last 4 games. Yes, you lost to the Clippers. That's a good team. That's fine. You lose to them. But you're losing to teams that are under 500, not great, not very competitive this year. It should be a little concerning for their team. During this time, the Rockets have fallen to 6th place, where 4 games ago, before this losing streak, it looked like they would crack the top 3, being right behind the Denver Nuggets and close to the Clippers and the Lakers. They got out-rebounded in this last game against the Orlando Magic, and the Magic had a 22-8 advantage in second chance points. So, yes, they're going to go small ball. This is how they have decided they're going to go. After trading Capella and bringing in Robert Covington, that is what they have fully set their sights on, is playing small ball. So if they're going to do that, they know that they're going to get out-rebounded. They know they'll probably give up second chance points. So what they need to do is find something that offsets that. And right now, the way that they're playing and the way that James Harden hasn't been efficient scoring-wise, they need to look for other ways to get open looks, get better, more productive looks, and just get back to winning ways. Because this team looked like they were going to be a really dangerous team on that 6-game win streak. And they had just figured things out with playing their small ball. And they looked indestructible for a second. But now they're showing a lot of signs of weakness. Maybe teams are starting to figure out how to play these guys. Or maybe it's just a case of the Rockets are just a little out of sorts right now. They need to find ways to get back into their rhythm. And they need to figure out how to do it quick. Because right now they're in 6th place. But the Dallas Mavericks are just a game behind them right now. Luckily for the Houston Rockets, they lost tonight against the Indiana Pacers, so that's a good sign for the Rockets to hold on. But they can get right back up there with the top 3 in the Western Conference if they play their best brand of basketball. But right now, they're not doing it, and it's not looking good for them. But the Rockets aren't the only team that are sliding. There are 2 teams in the East who have been out of sorts as of late. We talk about the Milwaukee Bucks and the Boston Celtics coming up next.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah. We just talked about the recent struggles for the Houston Rockets. They've been really struggling, to say the least, as of late. They're on a 4-game losing streak right now. During that time, they've lost to the New York Knicks, where they just got bullied down low. They lost to Los Angeles Clippers, which is, excusable because the Clippers had been on a tear at that point. But then they followed that game up by losing to the Charlotte Hornets, and they lost also to the Orlando Magic. And they're not just losing by a few points. They're getting blown out in these games. A lot of the fact having to do with that James Harden just hasn't been as efficient as he's been for most of the season so far. In his game against the Charlotte Hornets, he posted a quadruple-double, having 10 turnovers. So not an impressive week for James Harden. I expect them to get back to their winning ways as soon as possible, but right now it's not looking good for Houston Rockets, and it's not looking good for the Milwaukee Bucks right now either. We talked about it earlier. The Bucks lost to the Los Angeles Lakers. That's excusable too. The Los Angeles Lakers are one of the best teams in the NBA, if not the best team. It's these two teams on the top right now. With that loss, it had put them at losing 2 of their last 3 games up to that point, which hasn't happened since October. Middleton underperformed, as did most of Giannis' supporting cast in this game. Even worse, though, Giannis had a scary fall late in that game. Ends up getting hurt. He tried to say it wasn't a big deal, said he was fine, but now it's considered a minor knee sprain, and he will be sitting out their next 2 games as of right now. Their next game coming up against the Suns, so even without your biggest star in Giannis Antetokounmpo, you'd think a team that has only lost 10 games on the year can handle that. You'd think. Clearly, Milwaukee was trying to get into the swing of things without their leader in the first quarter because they got absolutely blitzed. The Suns outscored the Bucks 47-28 in the first quarter. Chris Middleton did have a great first quarter, though, scoring 18 points, but he was outshined by Devin Booker, who had 20 points of his own on much more prolific and efficient shooting. And by that, I mean he just shot more from the field, didn't get his points necessarily from the line, and he didn't really miss. He was just that hot. The Suns team as a whole scored 9 3-pointers in the first alone, so that's really tough for any team to try and combat. And the Bucks would make some valiant efforts to get back into the game, their third quarter being their best scoring performance, with them scoring 32 points to the Suns' 25 points in this one. But that the closest they would come to actually having a chance was when they cut the deficit to 7, but then the Suns just ballooned out their lead again. The Bucks would come within 6 with 24 seconds left, but at that point, the Suns would just ice this one at the free throw line, winning this game 140-131. It's a big outscoring game right there. Devin Booker in this one had 36 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists, 20 of those coming in just the first quarter alone. Ricky Rubio had 25 points, 13 rebounds, and 13 assists. He is now the first Suns player since Steve Nash on March 30th, 2005, with at least 12 points, 12 assists, and 12 rebounds. Ricky Rubio said after the game he was very honored to be in the same kind of sentence or conversation as Steve Nash, as he's a player that he's looked up to most of his career. Aaron Baines as well, who's been on fire in the last 2 games, had 24 points and 7 rebounds in this one. Michael Bridges had 21 points and 10 rebounds. So that's 4 players for the Phoenix Suns that were over 20 points, which is very impressive for them because they haven't been necessarily one of the better teams in the NBA this season. So that's a good performance for them against a good team. For the Milwaukee Bucks, Middleton bounced back after not playing well against the Lakers. He did have a good game in this one. He had 39 points. He had 2 rebounds and 4 assists. And then Eric Bledsoe, he's a former Sun, so he probably got up for this game as well. He responded well to his poor outing, had 28 points, 3 rebounds, 7 assists. And then Brook Lopez had 18 points, and DiVincenzo had 16 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. The next game will still be without Giannis, and it's against the Denver Nuggets. So, as of right now, the Milwaukee Bucks have lost 3 of their last 4. That is absolutely unheard of for a team that has lost only 11 on the year as a whole. And now that they're up against the Denver Nuggets, who are 3rd place in the Western Conference, a great formidable team, without Giannis still, it's looking like it's going to be 4 losses in their last 5, which is just insane because the Milwaukee Bucks seem so untouchable up until this point. But another team that's in the East that's struggling are the Boston Celtics. February was a really good month for the Boston Celtics. From a team standpoint, having finished the month winning 14 of their last 17 games at one point, and their superstar in Jason Tatum having his best month of his career, most likely. He was a man on fire during this time. However, now things have taken a turn in March. They've lost 4 straight at home for the first time since 2015. And now instead of being tied in the loss column with the Raptors, they're 3 games behind them for the 2nd seed, which is where they want to be right now. They want to be in that 2nd seed so they don't have to face the Bucks till the Eastern Conference Finals. They want to be able to play with either the Brooklyn Nets or the Orlando Magic. It's just a better look to be in 2nd right now. Their biggest issue is holding on to large leads, which we've talked about in previous podcasts, and you would think, how is that your biggest issue? Like if you have such big leads, hold on to the game. Just hold on. Their most recent loss coming at the hands of the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder are a great team. We've talked about it plenty in podcasts past. They're 14-9 against teams in the Eastern Conference, but the Celtics are a powerhouse. They're 3rd place in the Eastern Conference, one of the best teams in the league. So will that record, reign true for this game? Plus, the Oklahoma City Thunder would be playing without leading scorer and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So it's not necessarily looking great for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Plus, Gordon Hayward also returned after missing 2 games with a bruised knee. So everything would point to the fact that the Celtics should win this game. The Celtics lost the first quarter, but bounced back strong in the second, and used a 19-4 run to be up 63-45 at one point. That 18-point lead being their largest of the game. But then they kind of got sloppy towards the end of the second quarter to close out the half, and the Thunder finished the quarter on a 7-0 run to make the deficit only 11 at halftime. The Celtics are up 63-52, but that 7-0 run at the end of the quarter for the Thunder would carry over into the third in terms of the momentum. The Thunder went on a 43-23 run to flip the script on the Celtics and come within 1 point heading into the fourth. So your 18-point lead is gone. Now this game is very close, and this game would be very back and forth for the rest of the game. With 1:14 left, Chris Paul would hit a mid-range jump shot to extend the Thunder's lead 103-100. Celtics would respond on the next possession with a Tice slam on a pass from Gordon Hayward, 103-102, Thunder still leading. Celtics would get a stop and head the other way with Tatum driving to the basket and finishing to take the lead 104-103 with 40 seconds left. Chris Paul would then miss a runner with 13 seconds left, and the ball would be put out of play, and the possession would go to Boston. So they're up 1 with less than 13 seconds to go. And so from here, you'd think, oh, it's a foul game. Just inbound the ball, get over halfway, get fouled, win this game. They get the ball into Kemba Walker, who takes off in the wrong direction for whatever reason. He runs back towards his basket, kind of puts himself in a corner. Then he goes behind the back to get by Chris Paul, which would have worked. He would have gone right past Chris Paul, but what he didn't know, Kemba Walker didn't know, was that Dennis Schroeder was right there with a very quick and smart double team. And so as Kemba's going behind the back, Schroeder steals the ball from Kemba, and then he lays it in to take a 105-104 lead for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Just like that. How did that happen? Poor execution. Jason Tatum would have a chance of his own to win the game with the clock winding down. He was 1v1 versus Chris Paul, who is much shorter, so this is a good matchup, you would think. But Chris Paul actually played amazing defense on this play, forced a really tough turnaround jump shot from Tatum that would hit the front iron and just fall out. The Celtics lose this game 105-104. The Thunder erased an 18-point lead for the Celtics. That's got to be demoralizing. Not only that, the Celtics have now lost 4 of their last 5 games. It's just absolutely insane. The Thunder bench outscored the Celtics bench 41-17. So that's just unacceptable. But a lot of that has to do with Dennis Schroeder, though. So also, Kemba is still shaking off some rust. He missed 5 straight games after the All-Star break due to left knee soreness, and he just hasn't been shooting the ball well. In the last 3 games he's played, he's shot 15 for 47. So he just needs to find a way to get some easy buckets and get himself back into a rhythm. Chris Paul was huge in this one without their leading scorer in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He scored 28 points, 6 rebounds, and 7 assists. Dennis Schroeder had 27 points, 2 rebounds, 6 assists. And then Gallinari had 18 points and 6 rebounds. For the Boston Celtics, it was Gordon Hayward in his first game back, leading all scorers. He had 24 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Jason Tatum didn't play great. He had 19 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, but shot 36% from the field. So not a great outing from him. Marcus Smart performed really well, had 19 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists. Then Kemba Walker had 14 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and shot 28% from the field and 22% from three-point land. So it's just not a great outing from the Boston Celtics. They honestly struggle against physical teams. And if the season ended today, they'd be up against the 76ers team that is physical and has beaten them 3 out of the 4 meetings that they've had this year. So the Boston Celtics are another team that just need to turn things around. But another team in the Eastern Conference that has made some headlines, firing their head coach. So could this be the work of the Nets superstars? Find out next.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about 2 big Eastern Conference powerhouses in the Milwaukee Bucks and the Boston Celtics being on a rough run of play as of late. Milwaukee Bucks just lost to the Lakers, then lost their star in Giannis Antetokounmpo to knee injury, who will be sitting out for the next 2 games as of right now. They lost to the Phoenix Suns in dramatic fashion. And then the Boston Celtics, they're having some rough run of their own. They just lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder. They blew an 18-point lead that they had at one point in the game. And now they've lost 4 of their last 5 games. So it's not looking good for those 2 Eastern Conference powerhouses right now, especially since the Bucks are up against the Nuggets coming up next game and they still don't have Giannis. So it could be even worse for them as well. But now, moving forward, we're talking about the Brooklyn Nets, who made a big splash in the offseason. As a reminder, they got Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. KD's been hurt all season long. He had a torn Achilles, so he won't be playing this season. We'll be back next season, though. And then Kyrie Irving was going to be your one star, kind of holding it down until he got back next year. But no, he's only played 20 games this season. He'll be out for the rest of the year after getting shoulder surgery. So it's not looking good for the Brooklyn Nets off-season splashes. Not really anything that's amounted to anything for this season, at least. They're 29-34. They're 7th in the East right now. They are in a playoff spot. But for whatever reason, they fire their coach, Kenny Atkinson. The Nets general manager, Sean Marks, released the following statement on Saturday to explain the decision. He said, quote, "After discussions with Kenny about the progress of the season, we mutually agreed that a coaching change would be in the best interest of the team. This was an extremely difficult decision. However, the organization believes it is one that is necessary at this time. Kenny was instrumental in developing our players and building the identity and culture we have become known for over these past 4 seasons. The foundation he helped put into place here is one that we will continue to build on in the coming seasons." A lot of question marks right off the bat about why this happened and the timing of why it happened as well. In a season where, you know, he's been the coach for 4 seasons at Brooklyn, going 118 wins, 190 losses, and he did get them some playoff experience last season. He has improved them every season since he's been there. I mean, when he first took over, the Nets were in full rebuild and relaunch mode, and he's steadily improved them each season he's been there. They went 42-40 last year, and their players absolutely loved him. The attitude he instilled into the players, the culture in which they played, and they were a great team to follow last year, that kind of Cinderella story. They're bound to make the playoffs again this year with a 5-game advantage over the 9th place Washington Wizards, sitting 7th place right now in the Eastern Conference standings. Also, last year they had D'Angelo Russell as his star. So playing with the star, it's a lot easier for someone to lead your team. But this year, both stars have pretty much been out the entire year. So he's had to deal with just Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, Joe Harris, and Jarrett Allen, which isn't terrible, but without that true star, that true all-star taking over your team, it's difficult to try and win games, especially in the way that the league is set up these days. Honestly, I think it was really unfair that he doesn't even get a chance to try and coach these guys together, and even more so unfair, in his last week as head coach of the Brooklyn Nets, on Tuesday, the Nets beat the Celtics in Boston in overtime. And then on Friday, the Nets score 139 points to blow out the Spurs as 8 players scored in double figures. That following Saturday morning, he gets fired. Tell me where that lines up. It doesn't make sense. Apparently, this was imminent, and they didn't feel like waiting until summer. Like this was a long time coming or something. Atkinson was also a contributing factor to KD signing with them. He said he looked up YouTube videos of Atkinson talking after games to see how he is about talking about his players and such, and he said that he liked his approach and appreciated the way that he carried himself and talked about his players and so on and so forth. Now, there is some speculation surrounding this news. Some people around the league are saying that Kyrie Irving was kind of on board with this, that he even pushed for this to happen after having soured on their relationship very early on. If that's true, that kind of just fuels the fire that Kyrie Irving is just kind of a problem in terms of being a superstar. He's had locker room issues. He's had issues being the leader of teams, and now he's pushing coaches out of their spots. Not only that, right after he found out the news, he said that he wants Tyronn Lue to be the coach. And so to handpick a coach that quickly after your previous coach had just gotten fired, I think is a little suspect. And it makes me think, because if KD and Kyrie Irving wanted Kenny Atkinson to stay, there's no way he's getting fired. There had to have been some sort of conversation between, the owner, GM, whoever, with their 2 superstars about this decision, because it could upset them and could, trickle off an effect to make them want to leave. Also, another big speculation, big reach that NBA Twitter had just a field day with, was that Kevin Durant, just hours before this news broke, was actually watching the Warriors game, tuned in, put on a story, what have you. So Warriors Twitter, NBA Twitter was kind of making fun about the fact that maybe he's just in his feels, misses the Golden State Warriors amidst a bunch of drama with the Brooklyn Nets. But I think that's all just fun that Twitter's having. But either way, this narrative that it was Kyrie Irving and the stars of the Brooklyn Nets pushing out Atkinson, DeAndre Jordan completely disputed this, said those rumors, he was just shocked upon hearing the news. He says he blames this on the business side of the game, that sometimes, coaches have to go, and that not one player was the cause for this. If the narrative is Irving and Durant wanted this because, they're new players, you'd have to throw in all the new players, including DeAndre Jordan himself. Jacques Vaughn will be interim head coach as of right now. As a head coach, he's gone 58-158, so not a great record. He was coaching the Orlando Magic at one point, and he's never made it to the playoffs as a head coach. So, probably not the guy that will take the helm for the long future, but as of right now, he is the coach, and in his first game, it was a winning effort. They beat the Bulls 110-107 despite being outscored in every single quarter except for one. Vaughn's one action as interim head coach was to start DeAndre Jordan. On the flip side, though, Chicago Bulls, not a great team, obviously, have been playing really poorly as of late, and they don't have Zach LaVine either, so not a really huge test in this one. Zach LaVine out with a strained left quadricep. In this game, Otto Porter Jr. scored 23 points, had 3 rebounds, 2 assists, with 4 steals. Kobe White, who said any team that they go up against, they're going to say that the Bulls, at least for the most part, play hard. So that's something he can take away from this and work and improve on for the future. Kobe White in this one had 21 points, 6 rebounds, 8 assists. Thaddeus Young had 17 points, 5 rebounds, and then Lauri Markkanen had 16 points. For the Brooklyn Nets, it was Dinwiddie who hit some clutch free throws at the end of the game to hold on to the lead. He had 24 points, 3 rebounds, 6 assists. Joe Harris had 23 points. Karis LeVert had 23 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. And then DeAndre Jordan in his start only a few times this year. He had 11 points, 15 rebounds, 4 assists, with 3 blocks. So a pretty good performance for him, getting plugged into the starting lineup. And a good win for the Brooklyn Nets, who have won 2 games in a row all of a sudden. But now they've got the Los Angeles Lakers coming up next, who have been, red hot. So it's going to be a really tough test for them to try and win this game. And I go back to the fact that they fired their head coach in Kenny Atkinson because I don't understand the timing of it all. I mean, the way that the Brooklyn Nets have been playing this year, it's not favorable really for any coach, but you're in a playoff spot. You've been a coach that has established a culture there in a time where the Brooklyn Nets just weren't anything spectacular for a really long time. I mean, they were bottom of the Eastern Conference for a couple years, made the jump to the playoffs last season, having an over 500 record, and then before he even gets a chance to play with these 2 brand new superstars next season, he gets canned. In a season where he's in the playoff picture again. Yes, they have a poor record in 29-34. It's under 500. But they're still heading to the playoffs. They're not serious contenders. I mean, how could they be without the 2 biggest superstars? I just think it's unfair. I'm not sure what the real narrative of all this is. I'm sure as time goes on, more news will slip out about this later on. And it'll be interesting to see who they hire. If they hire Tyronn Lue, I'll think Kyrie Irving is pulling all the strings. That's honestly will be my belief. But nevertheless, coming up next, we finish the show with who's hot and who's not. So stay with us.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about the Brooklyn Nets firing their coach, Kenny Atkinson, which is such a weird time for them to do so. I mean, playoffs are right around the corner. He's gotten them to 7th place in the Eastern Conference. It's looking like they're going to make the playoffs with the Washington Wizards 5 games behind them, 6 games behind them at this point. And it's just looking like they're going to make another trip to the playoffs after having done so last season. So he's steadily improved this team. He has done so without Kevin Durant once this season, has done so without Kyrie Irving for most of this season. And all of a sudden, he gets fired after being somewhat successful. And a lot of the narrative is the fact that Kyrie Irving pushed for this after their relationship soured very early on. But it's honestly a curious situation. And I'll be interested to see if more information comes out on this in the future. But for now, we're going to focus on the matter at hand. We're doing who's hot and who's not. And coming in at number 5 are the Toronto Raptors, who are on a 3-game win streak. They are 6-4 in their last 10, so they haven't been that great. And in their 3-game win streak, they've only beaten teams like the Golden State Warriors, who haven't been great. They did have Stephen Curry in that game, so it was somewhat of an impressive win. But then they beat the Sacramento Kings, kind of making a push for playoffs, so they're playing at a high level right now. And then they beat the Phoenix Suns. So all teams that are kind of lower end of the Western Conference, but they're holding on firmly to second place right now. They're also one of 3 teams who have clinched a playoff spot. So, for me, that is an impressive enough feat for them to be here at number 5 on my list. Coming in at number 4 are the Indiana Pacers. They are on a 2-game winning streak. They have won 8 of their last 10 games. Most notably, they've beaten the Mavericks Sunday night, holding off a team that has been playing pretty well as of late. They've been making some more headway in the Western Conference standings. They're in 7th place right now, just a game behind the Houston Rockets, a game and a half behind the Thunder for 5th place. And before that, they were playing really well, especially Luka and Porzingis. They've been playing really well, complementing each other really well lately. But yeah, the Pacers win this game. They had been slipping a couple weeks ago, but now they're back on track, currently in 5th place in the Eastern Conference. So it's a good look for them, and they're playing a lot better. Coming in at number 3 is the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're on a 3-game win streak. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games. They just beat the Celtics in impressive fashion. I mean, they came back being down 18 points at one point without your top scorer and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, that's a great grind out win, and they've done this consistently over the year. And now that they've won this game, they're in 5th place in the Western Conference. They've leapfrogged teams like the Dallas Mavericks, the Houston Rockets, and they're looking to beat out the Jazz and maybe even the Nuggets. I mean, this Thunder team has surprised people all season long. At this point, it would not surprise me if they got even higher in the standings. It would not surprise me because they've just been that good. I mean, surprisingly enough, they've been that good and that consistent this year. So they're number 3 right now. Number 2 is the Utah Jazz, who are very quietly hot right now. I mean, I haven't heard much talk about them as of late, probably just because of the competition they play, but they are on a 5-game win streak. It is a pretty weak schedule during this 5-game win streak, games that you would expect them to win. But either way, you got to win them. They beat the Pistons, the New York Knicks, the Cavs, and the Wizards, but they did also beat the Celtics, so some props there. Though the Boston Celtics are struggling as of late, the Utah Jazz still have to beat them, and the Boston Celtics can turn it on at any point, so it's an impressive win there. The team generally has a roller coaster type of season. They're on a win streak one week and then on a losing streak the next. They're very up and down, so even though they're on my hot list right now, I expect that soon they'll probably have some sort of losing streak go on. But they have gone back to 4th place in the Western Conference, where they want to live, where they want to be. They were battling with the Houston Rockets for a good portion of the season so far. But so they made some good progress in getting back up to the standings and getting that home court advantage for at least the first round. And then coming in at number 1, the hottest team in the NBA right now are the Los Angeles Lakers. They're on a 4-game win streak. They've won 13 of their last 15 games. And last 2 games are the only games I need to mention as to why they're the hottest team in the NBA. They beat the Milwaukee Bucks, the best team in the NBA, and they beat the Los Angeles Clippers, the second best team in the Western Conference. Those are 2 ridiculous teams. Reopening the debate of who's MVP. LeBron James, 35 years old in his 17th season, somehow is still one of the greatest players in the NBA. And he shows it night in, night out, leading the league in assists, in a category where that hasn't necessarily been his game. And in doing so, he hasn't hindered his ability to go score either. posted 37 against the Milwaukee Bucks. Not as much scoring against the Clippers, but either way, he shut down Giannis and he shut down Kawhi whenever he was matched up against them. Though, it's just impressive to me to see how consistent the Los Angeles Lakers have been. And just the fact alone that they beat the Bucks and the Clippers in a 2-game span and are on a 4-game win streak, got to give it to them. They're number one, hottest team in the NBA right now. Some honorable mentions, though. We'll talk about the New Orleans Pelicans. They're on a 2-game win streak. They're 4 games back from the Memphis Grizzlies. So they're looking to push for that last playoff spot. They're right there, playing some great basketball, most notably beating the Miami Heat recently. Other teams with 2-game win streaks are the Brooklyn Nets, the Orlando Magic, who are 6-4 in their last 10 all of a sudden. The Cavaliers are on a 2-game win streak, surprisingly enough, to try and get out of last place. And the Phoenix Suns as well are on a 2-game win streak. Now we're going to move over to who's not hot. Coming in at number 5 is the Portland Trail Blazers. I just don't understand this team. They're so up and down this year. They are on a 2-game losing streak. They are 3-7 in their last 10 during a time where they want to make a push for that last playoff spot. They have fallen off after coming within 2.5 to 3 games or so behind the Memphis Grizzlies looking to make that push. They lost to the Kings, another team fighting for that same playoff picture, and the Phoenix Suns. I mean, I just don't understand where they go wrong because they have such great players. Yes, they don't have Zach Collins right now, so that hurts, but you just got Damian Lillard back, so you should be better, right? I mean, you have star power. You should be competing better than you are right now. Number 4 are the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are on a 2-game losing streak right now, 3-7 in their last 10. They've lost to the Pelicans, who are a pretty good team making that push, so it's really tough. But they also lost to Orlando Magic, who, even though they're sitting in a playoff spot right now, probably fighting to stay there. But either way, I just don't see them being a formidable opponent, in my opinion. But then again, neither is the Minnesota Timberwolves. They are without Karl-Anthony Towns, who has been out due to injury, so it's been really tough for them. I think what they need to do, call up Omari Spellman. He just got his first career triple-double the other night in the G League, and the dude is just a beast. I mean, if you look at what he did on the Golden State Warriors, he just is such a great player, all-around player. He gives you that high energy. Bring him up. He can be a big man to fill the role that Karl-Anthony Towns fills usually when he's not injured. I think that'll be a big boost for the Timberwolves if they do that. Number 3, Atlanta Hawks, 3-game losing streak. Lost to the Grizzlies twice, and also the Washington Wizards, though, so it is tough for them. During this stretch, Capella still hasn't played since that trade that happened a month or a few weeks ago. Reddish also went out last game injured. John Collins has been day-to-day, as well as Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter, and Jeff Teague. So they have some injury woes right now, and they are the last and worst team in the Eastern Conference right now. So it's tough to be an Atlanta Hawks fan as of right now. But it's even worse to be a Chicago Bulls fan. Number 2, 3-game losing streak. They've won only 2 of their last 15 games. They've lost to the Nets and the T-Wolves most recently. And like I said before, they don't have Zach LaVine, so it is tough for them to try and be competitive. Kobe White, though, is kind of a bright spot. Maybe somebody you could look to build your team around moving forward in the future. He's been playing really well this season. But for now, this team is just not cutting it. And the team that's even worse, number 1 on who's not hot, the Detroit Pistons. They're on a 4-game losing streak. They only have 3 wins in their last 20 games. And they've lost to teams like the New York Knicks and the Kings most recently. They still don't have Blake Griffin. And now they don't have Derrick Rose either, who is your best player. So it's just been tough for the Detroit Pistons. They've been playing really poorly. They've fallen pretty far in this Eastern Conference standings. They're in 13th right now, looking to fall even farther, honestly. The Hawks and the Cavaliers are just a game behind them, so they could potentially be the last in the East by the end of the season. Some honorable mentions really quick. The Milwaukee Bucks, I know. They're the best team in the NBA. I just have to mention it, though. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games. Boston Celtics as well. Got to mention it. lost 4 of their last 5 games. And then the Spurs lost 2 games in a row, 4-6 in the last 10. They're another team fighting for playoffs, so it's pretty disappointing how poorly they've been playing. It's like all of these teams fighting for this last playoff spot just don't want it. Just win a few games in a row and take over this last playoff spot. If the Memphis Grizzlies end up with this last playoff spot, I'll be shocked. Absolutely shocked, because there are so many teams fighting for the position. The Wizards and the Knicks as well are 3-7 in their last 10, just haven't been playing well for most of the season. So that'll wrap up who's hot and who's not, and that'll wrap up this podcast. So thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review, because that really helps us out. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I would greatly appreciate that. I'm Isiah Quiroz. Thank you all. See you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.